Okay, we're going to talk about Ukraine today and the situation there. Let's talk about the status of the situation as it is. There is, well, not a ceasefire, something that pretends to be a ceasefire, a very, very limited ceasefire in regard to not attacking enemy infrastructure, power stations on either side, which Donald Trump has managed to negotiate, calling that 30-day very partial ceasefire. A ceasefire is stretching a point. It's slated to end soon on the 17th of April. So, hopefully that at least will be renewed, but it's not much of an achievement. But at least it's something. Russia refuses to agree to anything further, and America is not pushing it. The Russian military is calling up another 160,000 men by raising the maximum age for the draft from 27 to 30. They're working towards a 1.5 million man army. That's their target. The United States has a brutish approach to peace by coercion, but Donald Trump's much vaunted import tax rate for Russia and Ukraine is equal for the pair of them at a minimum rate of 10% or a maximum rate of 10%, a rate of 10%. Yeah, so no coercion there. It's the same as Britain, actually. No coercion there. There seems to be little coercion of Russia, and thus, for Donald Trump, well, he likes crude expressions. I'll give you a crude expression. He's all mouth and no trousers. It's an old Welsh expression. When it comes to twisting Russia's arm, he's all mouth and no trousers. Ukraine still holds a very narrow strip of Kursk Oblast, but has withdrawn under fire from the rest. Never an easy thing to do, some military guy told me the other day. Russia has put most of its forces into Kursk, the section of Russia that Ukraine was occupying in a counteroffensive. There's little movement on other fronts. You get reports of minor Ukrainian gains and minor Russian gains, but troops are mostly bogged down by winter. However, spring comes to Ukraine now, right now, at the beginning of April. So now the brutal fighting will begin again in earnest. What's the Russian position? The Russian has its red line, as you know, no NATO membership for Ukraine. Not that there's any prospect of anything of that kind. Former Democrat President Joe Biden was pretty unkeen on it, effectively ruling it out, even though he didn't exactly say so. And Donald Trump is very unlikely indeed to accept NATO membership for Ukraine. But he's been promoting this ceasefire. He said he could fix the whole thing in one day. Well, Russia regards the ceasefire as a trap at a time in which, with the help of North Korean troops, it's almost driven Ukraine right out of the Kursk Oblast, which Ukraine had partially occupied. Oblast is province, or governorate, if you prefer. Had Russia agreed to a ceasefire, it would have given Ukraine a strategic breather for its troops, a chance to rearm, whilst Russia, in turn, lost battlefield momentum. Russian hawks, that's the word from the street in Russia, well, from the street from our insiders in Russia, Russian hawks are discussing prospects of taking Sanskaya district, Sanskaya Oblast in Ukraine, part of Ukraine, the oblast from which Ukraine's attack on Kursk Oblast in Russia was launched. Well, it would be stupid, wouldn't it? But put nothing past the Russians. Interestingly, though, Russia will not accept peacekeeping troops from any NATO country in Ukraine at any point in the future. Sure, well, okay, interesting. I say that's interesting. It's interesting because of what I'm about to tell you, which comes straight from the Russians. It will accept peacekeeping troops from non-NATO countries, such as, and they mentioned three, NATO, Nepal, the Philippines, and Sri Lanka. I mean, well, I'm just telling you, non-NATO countries, Russia does not mind. They don't mind NATO troops as observers along a ceasefire line as long as they came from Slovenia or Hungary. I think they're the only two countries they like in NATO. They could have an observer role. At least Russia would think about that. What's my view? Well, my view is the Next Century Foundation view is pretty much along the lines of the following. Well, this is my personal view, I guess. Trustees of the Next Century Foundation wouldn't be too pleased if I said it was the NCF view. But anyway, Ukraine and Russia should agree to an armistice. You understand an armistice? A permanent ceasefire, like after the First and Second World War. That's different from ceasefire. An armistice line is final, like between India and Pakistan at the end of the Kashmir War that they fought, and that's still holding. Yeah, and in that context, Ukraine need not recognize the Russian claim to the part of Ukraine it holds, and vice versa, just as India does not recognize the Pakistan claim to the part of Kashmir it holds, and vice versa. You can have an armistice without necessarily solving all the problems, and this is the only way in this instance. In other words, it's the difference between de facto and de jure sovereignty. In other words, Ukraine accepts the fact of Russian hegemony over parts of Ukraine it occupies without giving up the idea that those parts of Ukraine are an integral sovereign part of Ukraine, and of course vice versa. Ukraine, meanwhile, would have to move out of the tiny part of Russia's Kursk Oblast it still controls, and it is tiny, what it's got left. As for the industrial Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine, what people call the Donbass, I guess the oblasts of Donetsk and Luhansk, currently under Russian control. Citizens of these areas could have the right to choose Russian or Ukrainian citizenship, or both, such as is practiced in Northern Ireland. You remember Clinton helped the British negotiate the Northern Ireland Agreement. God bless him. Now, there's a good American president. If you can forgive him his proclivity for chasing girls. He was a good president, and he worked hard at that, as did one or two British prime ministers, and John Major amongst them, and they delivered the Northern Ireland Agreement between Britain and the Republic of Ireland. And if you live in Northern Ireland, disputed territory, you got it? If you live in Northern Ireland, you can be a citizen of Ireland, you can be a citizen of Britain, or you can take two passports. Go for it. Essentially, at best, it's a compromise solution, but it's a compromise solution that's proved to work. And watch it, you cannot just blow a whistle and call an armistice. There are a number of issues to be sorted. Even, the ceasefire in the Black Sea to allow grain exports. A ceasefire much touted by America is going nowhere until sanctions on Russian grain exports are sorted. So that kind of thing needs figuring out. And also any border between different regions under either Russian or Ukrainian hegemony within Ukraine cannot be a hard border. Some towns like Pokrovsky, well, it's a name that was picked out of the air and thrown at me, and it's typical of a number. straddle any potential border and are on the front line. And they cannot be divided and still remain viable. A soft border is required, like the border between Switzerland and the European Union, where basically you can drive through if you've got a passport, and only occasional car will be stopped, but lorries and trucks get inspected and so on. That's the answer. This is helped by the fact that EU membership for Ukraine is not a red line for Russia. NATO membership is a red line for Russia. EU membership is not, which is I don't know whether it's a blessing or a curse for the European Union, because Ukraine comes with a lot of baggage, and if it's going to be taken into the European Union, whoa, that's going to be expensive for the EU. It's already costing the EU an arm and a leg, so what difference, I guess. The main thing overall is to stop people killing each other. If the Ukraine war is stopped, then millions, tens of millions of ordinary people in Russia and Ukraine will be able to breathe a sigh of relief. And that all depends on Donald Trump. He is the only one, regrettably, but it's a fact, he is the only one with the clout to bring home the bacon when it comes to Ukraine. He has claimed repeatedly to be able to do it. Well, he should man up and step up to the plate and get it done, or he should shut up and go home. It's now or never before Ukraine becomes the European Vietnam, so Donald Trump, we're watching. You promised. It means you have to be tough on Russia. But you need to get it done. Now's the time for all good men to come to the aid of the party. We need peace in Ukraine. It's solvable, so let's solve that one. Even if you can't solve all the misery in the rest of the world, you can get that one fixed. So let's do it. In the name of God and in all humanity. Okay. God bless you and keep you. Thank you for your patience. Bye.